Hey, so what do you do when you have to choose between obeying an order or doing the right thing? Let's talk about it. So it's 1995. It's my first Coast Guard unit. At this point, I had already served in the Navy in 88. I switched to the Coast Guard. I'm walking across the brow of the Coast Guard cutter Vigilant. I had no idea that I was about to receive one of my first major history lessons in leadership. And deciding on whether to do the right thing or just obey an order. So anyone who reported aboard that cutter had to learn the story of Simas Kadurkas. Simas Kadurkas was a Lithuanian sailor during the USSR, and he, while the Coast Guard cutter Vigilant back in 1970 was on a port visit overseas, he was on an adjacent USSR warship, ran off at the boat, his ship, and ran aboard the Coast Guard cutter Vigilant to request asylum. The Coast Guard at the time didn't know how to deal with something like this. The engineering crew aboard the Coast Guard cutter, you gotta love our snipes. Their first response was, Captain, we'll just hide this guy. We can hide him in the engineering department. We can hide him in the engineering spaces. They'll never find him, they being the USSR. Well, the commanding officer, wanting to follow procedure and protocol, contacted the land area commander, which is an admiral, and I believe it was Admiral Ellis at the time. And Admiral Ellis understood that the Coast Guard cutter Vigilant was in that current port as a result of fisheries negotiations. And both the admiral and his chief of staff decided that they did not want any form of international incident or argument to affect the those negotiations. So he ordered the captain to return the asylum-seeking sailor. The captain, hearing that order, really didn't want to get his hands dirty or his crew's hands dirty with being involved in handing over the sailor. So instead, he made the decision to allow the USSR personnel to come aboard his ship and take Simas by force off his ship. This obviously didn't sit well with Simas's family or even the crew. This situation went all the way to President Ford at the time, and Henry Kissinger, who was the Secretary of State. The issue was, can or when someone runs aboard a U.S. flag vessel, especially a U.S. flag warship or Coast Guard cutter, or running on board a base or anything else, seeking asylum, should they be under our protection? And it turns out, yeah, but there was nothing in writing. There was no actual policy. As a matter of fact, Admiral Ellis, his chief of staff, and the commanding officer were all disciplined and relieved of their commands as a result of this decision. A book was written, Day of Shame. A made-for-TV movie back in the 70s was made. I believe they used the Coast Guard cutter Confidence as the boat to film this made-for-TV movie about what turned out to be a pretty big embarrassment and lapse in leadership. The lesson is we did learn from it, and once again we learned that just obeying an order should never outweigh doing the right thing. with just a little bit further investigation, Secretary of State Kissinger, under President Ford, determined that an investigation that the sailor, the Lithuanian sailor, his mother was actually born in the United States. Sounds like birthright citizenship. And as a result, they were able to bring this up to the USSR, that was more than eager to use this as a negotiating tool and some other dealings that they were doing. And if you go to the Ford online museum, you'll see the Gerald Ford, President Gerald Ford online museum. You'll see the actual documents with the communications about this. How many times have we suffered as enlisted or as first responders obeying orders blindly? I mean, I understand, as a former NCO, I was a chief petty officer, and I was a sergeant with the Alaska State Troopers. Sometimes we don't have time to question orders in a dynamic situation, or question every order. However, the core transaction should always be, is this the right thing to do? Is this the right thing to do overall? And if your heart's telling you no, then I would argue that it more than likely is a bad thing to do, and it should be readdressed. A solution should come up. Just saying no is not an option either. That's disrespectful. But when you make the decision to not follow the lawful order, to not follow that order, whether it's determined to be lawful or not, you should come up with a solution. Now, ultimately, one of the solutions is having a written policy that addresses every situation. That's not always possible, though. The core transaction should always be based on, is it humanely right? If you question that, take a look at all the service members, first responders that are dealing and suffering from PTSD right now. They were told they were making the right decision, but politics, a need for promotion or something else prevailed. I would argue, lead from the heart. I would argue, do the right thing for the right reasons right away. Feel free to look into the Vigilant case study. And more importantly, just remember, do the right thing. Lead from the heart. Take care of each other. And learn from history. Good and bad. Don't forget the past. Let's learn from it. Don't dwell in the past, but let's learn from it and be better. Take care, and I'll see you on the next one.